Our first guest tonight is the most powerful movie star in the world. Top Gun Maverick is nominated for 6 Oscars, including Best Picture. Please welcome the one, the only Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise has spent the last 4 decades building something few people in entertainment ever achieve. A career that survived scandal, reinvention, and relentless public scrutiny. Yet beneath every box office record and franchise success sits a question that has haunted him since 2005. Crystallized during a moment on a daytime television show that would define how the world saw him. The question is simple but loaded with complexity. Who is Tom Cruise really, and what does he actually believe? His journey to that question began in circumstances most people never know. Thomas Cruise Maypother entered the world on December 3, 1962, in Syracuse, New York, though his childhood would take him everywhere except toward stability. His father, Thomas Maypother III, worked as an electrical engineer, a profession that demanded movement from one job to the next, one city to another. For young Tom, this meant an almost constant cycle of new schools, new neighborhoods, new faces that would eventually know him only as the kid passing through. By his teenage years, he had attended more than a dozen schools across multiple states and 2 countries. That kind of frequent displacement creates a specific kind of loneliness in a child. He was not poor in material terms, but he was poor in the continuity that helped a child develop roots and confidence. What made those years harder was the environment waiting at home. His father was not simply strict or authoritarian. He was calculated in his cruelty. Tom would later describe him as someone who could create moments of calm and safety, only to shatter that feeling with sudden violence. That unpredictability became its own form of control. It taught young Tom to watch constantly, to read every shift in mood, every subtle change in tone. He learned that safety was temporary, and that trust could evaporate without warning. That lesson imprinted itself on him in ways that would surface decades later in his approach to relationships, to authority, and to belief systems that promise control over uncertainty. By adolescence, something unexpected happened. At 14 years old, Tom became genuinely interested in Catholic priesthood. This was not rebellion against his family situation. This was something else entirely. He enrolled at St. Francis Seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the fall of 1976, where he found something his childhood had never offered: structure, routine, discipline, and a clear moral framework. Seminary life appealed to him precisely because it was ordered and predictable. He attended Mass daily. He followed the rules. For a boy who had spent his entire life feeling unmoored, the Franciscan tradition offered exactly what he needed: a place where things made sense and where his role was clear. The seminary chapter ended abruptly. Tom and a close friend stole sacramental wine, intended for a celebration, and were discovered. He was expelled. Another door closing in what had become a pattern of doors closing throughout his childhood. Yet, this moment matters because it reveals something important about his nature. He was not cynical about authority at that age. He was not rebelling against the structure itself. He was seeking it. He wanted to be part of something larger than himself that had clear answers. School itself had always been difficult for reasons beyond the constant moving. Tom struggled with dyslexia from an early age, a learning difference that made reading feel like trying to navigate the world with a fundamental sense missing. He spent years in remedial classrooms, watching other children grasp things that seemed locked away from him. By the time he graduated high school in 1980, he described himself as functionally illiterate. That is not hyperbole spoken in a moment of frustration. That is a measure of how deeply the struggle had embedded itself. Reading was not simply a skill he had not yet mastered. It felt like proof that something essential about his brain did not work the way other people's brains worked. Years later, when Scientology entered his life through his first marriage to actress Mimi Rogers in 1987, it did not arrive as abstract philosophy. It arrived offering a direct answer to one of the oldest wounds he carried. Scientology's study technology promised that its methods could unlock the barriers that had blocked him since childhood. For someone who had spent his entire life feeling broken around reading and learning, that promise was not simply appealing. It was transformative. For the first time, someone was offering him an explanation and a cure for something that had made him feel fundamentally defective. The timing was crucial. Tom Cruise had just become a global star. Top Gun had released in 1986, turning him into an international icon. He was young, successful, emotionally vulnerable in ways the public never saw, and searching for something that could explain and potentially fix the deep wounds of his childhood. His marriage to Rogers moved quickly and lasted only 3 years. But during those years, he became genuinely connected to Scientology, the church under control of David Miscavige, who had taken over after founder L. Ron Hubbard's death in 1986, was actively pursuing celebrities as part of a deliberate strategy. Tom Cruise was a perfect recruit. Famous enough to build the church's credibility, emotionally open enough to respond to its promises, and struggling with specific problems that Scientology claimed to solve. What people often misunderstand about Tom's commitment to Scientology is that it was not coerced or forced. He was seeking something, and the church provided it. He was wounded by his past, and the church offered healing narratives. He wanted to understand his dyslexia and the learning struggles that had haunted him, and Scientology offered answers. Whether those answers were true became almost secondary to the fact that someone was finally taking his problems seriously and offering concrete solutions. His subsequent marriages and relationships have been scrutinized through the lens of Scientology's involvement, particularly his marriage to Nicole Kidman from 1990 to 2001. Reports from former Scientology insiders claim that church leadership disapproved of Kidman because her father was a psychiatrist, and Scientology has a well-documented antagonism towards psychiatric medicine. These accounts describe Kidman as eventually becoming labeled a suppressive person after divorce, a designation that would theoretically justify treating her as a threat to the organization. Whether every detail of those claims is accurate remains difficult to verify with complete certainty, but the pattern they describe aligns with documented Scientology practices and the testimonies of multiple former members. His personal life began to intersect with his public image in ways that created genuine damage starting in 2005. On May 23rd of that year, Tom appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show to promote War of the Worlds. When Oprah mentioned actress Katie Holmes, Tom jumped up from his seat, dropped to his knees, bounced onto the couch, and displayed a level of intensity that television audiences found deeply unsettling. The moment lasted only seconds, but it circled the globe. Some interpreted it as joyful spontaneity. Others found it erratic and disturbing. What mattered was not the interpretation, but the image itself. Tom Cruise, who had maintained an image of controlled perfection, suddenly looked uncontrolled on live television in front of millions of viewers. Weeks later, he appeared on the Today Show with Matt Lauer and criticized actress Brooke Shields for taking medication for postpartum depression. He dismissed psychiatry as pseudoscience, made factually incorrect claims about chemical imbalances in the brain, and spoke with absolute certainty about subjects that medical science had already thoroughly documented. His comments were not presented as personal opinion or spiritual belief. They were presented as fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who believed he knew better than the medical community. The backlash was immediate and severe. Mental health organizations responded with corrections. Millions of people who had benefited from psychiatric medication and antidepressants felt attacked by someone using his massive platform to delegitimize their own medical choices. That appearance cost him significantly. Sumner Redstone, the head of Paramount Pictures' parent company Viacom, made a shocking public statement in 2006. He said Tom Cruise had embarrassed the studio and cost them money. Redstone was blunt in a way Hollywood executives almost never are in public, suggesting that Cruise's behavior had caused women to avoid his films in large numbers and that the damage to Paramount could have totaled as much as $150 million. For an actor who had been untouchable throughout the 1990s, this was a public humiliation. His production company, which had operated on the Paramount lot for over a decade, was shut down. In January 2008, an internal Scientology video featuring Tom Cruise leaked online and spread across the internet before the church could contain it. Filmed years earlier for internal church purposes, the footage showed him in a black turtleneck, wearing an ID badge, speaking with absolute certainty about Scientology's superiority in understanding the human mind. He claimed that Scientologists were the real experts on consciousness and mental health, that they were the ones who could truly help people after trauma or crisis. The video was strange, intense, and deeply uncomfortable to watch. When the church tried to suppress it through legal channels, they only accelerated its spread across the internet. The footage became permanently linked to his public image, a symbol of the gap between Tom Cruise the actor and Tom Cruise the true believer in a controversial religion. Reports from former Scientology insiders added another dimension to his story. Mark Headley, who had worked inside the organization, described a system where Tom received constant service and attention from church workers. According to Headley, people would clean his house, prepare his meals, handle personal tasks, and generally manage his daily comfort as though serving him was a sacred duty. These were not paid positions with typical employment relationships. They were volunteer roles within the church structure. Other reporting suggested that his romantic relationships were not entirely his own decisions. According to Vanity Fair's investigation into Scientology and celebrity, young actresses were quietly evaluated as potential partners for him in the early 2000s. One woman, Nazanin Boniati, became particularly associated with these accounts, though the church denied all allegations. This is the context that makes his marriage to Katie Holmes and its dissolution so significant. They married in November 2006, and Katie became the visible face of the happy celebrity couple that Scientology seemed to want presented to the world. Then, on June 28, 2012, Holmes filed for divorce while Tom was away filming. The settlement moved with remarkable speed, concluded in just 11 days, which suggested to observers that extensive preparation and negotiation had happened privately before the filing became public. Later reporting painted Holmes as methodical and strategic, moving carefully because she understood the stakes involved. Whether every tabloid detail was accurate or not, the overall shape of the story was clear. She had decided to leave and had planned her exit with precision. Throughout all of this turmoil around his personal life and his association with Scientology, Tom's film career had another story entirely. After the damage from 2005 and 2006, industry observers were already writing his epitaph as a star. Then Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol arrived in December 2011 and changed the conversation completely. The film grossed nearly $700 million worldwide and re-established him as a bankable star capable of carrying massive budgets. More importantly, it shifted his brand. Tom began making physical risk and danger central to his image. He held onto the side of an airplane during takeoff for Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation. He performed a rooftop jump in London for Mission Impossible, fallout and broke his ankle during the stunt, an injury captured on film. Because the cameras were rolling when it happened, he made his willingness to endure pain and risk his body part of the entertainment itself. That image intensified during the COVID-19 pandemic. In December 2020, leaked audio from the set of Mission Impossible 7 captured him screaming at crew members about safety protocols. He was furious, threatening, and clearly aware that every shutdown was costing enormous amounts of money. Some listeners heard aggression and control. Others heard commitment to the job. Either way, the moment fit perfectly with the public version of Tom Cruise that had been building. Someone disciplined, demanding, theatrical, and unwilling to relax when the stakes were high. Then came Top Gun: Maverick, which opened on May 27, 2022, and became the biggest film of his career and one of the biggest films in Paramount history. It grossed over $1.4 billion worldwide. More remarkably, this was not a young star riding a first wave of success. This was Tom Cruise 36 years after the original Top Gun somehow becoming even bigger. The film demonstrated that he had not simply survived the damage of the Scientology association. He had transcended it through his art and his willingness to make physical commitment part of the product. Yet the spiritual dimension of his story never fully resolved. Before Scientology, he had seriously considered Catholic priesthood. That fact creates a fascinating contrast in the minds of his observers. A man who once moved close to one faith had given his loyalty to another religion that many theologians and religious scholars argue sits in direct opposition to Christianity. That contradiction became a source of online fascination throughout 2024 and into 2025. In 2025, a narrative began circulating across social media and YouTube that suggested Tom Cruise had been confronted about Jesus Christ on live television by Jonathan Rooney, the actor famous for playing Jesus in the television series The Chosen. The story was constructed as a dramatic moment where a man famous for portraying Jesus challenged the world's most famous Scientologist about his spiritual beliefs. Videos about this supposed encounter proliferated with dramatic thumbnails and breathless narration. They were crafted to feel authentic, using editing techniques and pacing that mimicked real news coverage. The problem was that no such public confrontation ever happened. No verified record of any live television exchange between Tom Cruise and Jonathan Rooney exists. The story was entirely fabricated, yet it spread because it satisfied people's desire to see that contradiction made visible and confronted directly. What gave that fabricated story just enough credibility to survive was a small, real incident. Evangelist Dylan Novak has publicly claimed that he managed to hand Tom Cruise a Christian gift bag at a Jack Reacher movie premiere in 2016. According to Novak, Tom accepted it graciously and even carried the bag to the screening. The incident was never broadcast, never became a public moment, and certainly never involved any religious debate. But it existed. It was a tiny real seed from which the internet could grow 1,000 exaggerated versions. One brief encounter, one spiritual message passed from one person to another in a controlled space, and suddenly people were constructing entire narratives about what that moment meant. Throughout 2025 and into 2026, Tom has made no public move toward distance from Scientology. In March 2026, he appeared in the front row at Scientology's annual event in Clearwater, Florida, celebrating the birthday of founder L. Ron Hubbard. He was photographed alongside other prominent Scientologists, rising in support of David Miscavige. The timing was telling because online discussions about Tom, Scientology, Jesus, and religious contradiction were already circulating widely by that point. Yet he appeared exactly where everyone would expect him to be, present, visible, and fully aligned with the organization that has shaped his adult life. His recent film work has continued at the same massive scale. Mission Impossible. The final reckoning reached theaters on May 23, 2025, after multiple delays, and is already committed to additional large-scale film projects. The pattern of his public life remains consistent: motion, scale, loyalty, and refusal to break the image in the ways observers continually predict. This is what makes Tom Cruise's story so compelling to the public imagination. He has survived scandals that would have ended most careers. He has weathered revelations about Scientology that would have caused other celebrities to create distance. He has endured fabricated stories about his spiritual beliefs and confrontations that never happened. Yet he continues to move forward, making blockbuster films, taking physical risks, appearing at Scientology events, and refusing to engage with the contradictions that observers find so fascinating. The mystery at the center of his story has never really been about Scientology specifically, or whether he will ever publicly acknowledge Jesus Christ or any other spiritual tradition besides his chosen faith. The real mystery is simpler and deeper. It is about whether a man who once sought the structure and answers of the Catholic priesthood genuinely believes he found what he was looking for in Scientology, or whether he became trapped in a system that promised to heal his wounds and instead became so intertwined with that system that he cannot imagine stepping outside it. The answer to that question might lie somewhere between those two possibilities. And that complexity is precisely why people keep watching, keep asking, and keep inventing stories about moments when the contradiction might finally become visible. Tom Cruise gave his loyalty to Scientology when he was emotionally vulnerable and searching for answers. Whether that was a choice he can still unmake, or whether it became something that unmade the possibility of choice itself, remains the unanswered question at the center of his biography.